Right as I'm about to start recording. Gotta love it. It's monsoon season here, so makes sense, I guess. Alright, y'all, welcome back to Combat Arms channel. So today's video, I'm finally doing the review of Unknown Soldier. Now, I've been meaning to get to this for a while now, of course, I've been saying that. And it took me a little bit longer than expected just to actually get all the clips together. And it might still be a little bit choppy just because I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to cut out from the clips themselves, because I'm not trying to have too much violence to where YouTube is just like, yeah, not a fan. So I will try and chop it up, and I'll definitely include whatever I feel like I really need to. So it is raining outside, if you guys couldn't see in that beginning clip. So I apologize if you do start hearing that. I do have my actual mic on now, so that's good. The audio should be a little bit better. But yeah, I'm very excited to get into this Unknown Soldier. It's a very, very awesome movie. And a lot of y'all have been recommending this movie to me, I'd say maybe like 2-3 months back when I really started doing the Finnish videos. And it took me a while to really get to watch it, but then one of y'all actually sent me the movie, so it really pressured me, and I got to watching it. I'm really, really glad I did, because I can say by far that is my favorite war movie that I've ever seen. And I mean, apparently this is the most expensive movie ever produced in Finland. I'm not sure if that's still true today, but I think this came out in 2017, so that's pretty incredible if that's actually true. Because you can imagine with like other countries and whatnot, they would invest most of their money into like CGI movies to where they're really making sure the special effects look good. But for a war movie to be the most expensive produced movie out there, then that really goes to show that they really wanted to put a lot into this. And you can tell they definitely knew what they were doing. And it even seems like they got people that were actually in the military to put a lot of input into this. So what I want to talk about in this video is what I've seen that I really, really love with the movie, what I've seen from other movies that didn't really do exactly the same as Unknown Soldier did, and how just Unknown Soldier in general takes it to a new level of war movie. Because it really doesn't feel like a war movie per se. It kind of feels like a drama that just takes place during a war, if that makes any sense. But you'll probably see what I mean. So I'm going to go over a few themes that I sort of saw during the movie, and we'll sort of talk about that and how it actually compares to what you might actually see or feel while you're actually in the military, or if you've actually been to combat. And it's really cool to see all these themes put into this movie, but it's also cool to try and get your mind inside the directors and what sort of approach they're actually taking to this movie. Because again, it's not so much an action movie. That's not just like action, every 3 seconds. There's a lot put into it that's you wouldn't really understand unless you had that military mindset, or if you knew exactly what people went through in the military. So the first one that is super prevalent, that Unknown Soldier does a lot better than other movies, is really showing the camaraderie with the soldiers themselves. Because I mean, when you think of Saving Private Ryan, there is a lot of camaraderie in that, but not nearly as much as you would see in Unknown Soldier. Black Hawk Down did a little bit better as far as showing the shared experiences all these guys are going through, and sort of seeing how it affects their relationship, I guess. But Unknown Soldier does it really, really well, to the point where it's almost whenever there's no action or there's no drama, you always have that camaraderie, and you always get to see how the relationship is actually building between the characters themselves. So I'm going to be pulling up clips. I'm going to be explaining why I like this clip so much, or why it actually stood out, especially compared to other movies out there.
Tähän. Jos mä vaan voisin, niin mä hajottaisin ne. Mitä semmoinen ollenkaan tekevä olemassa, kun ei mitään tee?
So this scene doesn't seem like much.
Se on semmoista puhetta vaan. Ei ihmistäkään luo tuolla.
It doesn't seem like much at all, but in reality, like, I like how they throw in those little moments. The movie isn't too long to where they can really draw out this stuff and really, put so much emphasis on it, but they really do a good job of balancing the action with, the storytelling and, these awesome scenes like this. So they didn't really need to do this, and I'm sure they have a lot of scenes that were cut out, but adding this really goes to show, like, yeah, even though you're put in a crappy situation, you can enjoy these small moments, even if it's just looking at the stars, talking about, whatever they're talking about. I think it was like capitalism in this movie or something weird like that. I mean, it's cool, the random conversations you can actually have in the military during these random moments, even if it's just looking up at the stars at night, if you can't sleep or what have you. You could have some really awesome conversations, and that's really cool how they sort of highlight it. They don't really go too in depth, But in reality, in the military, there's not a whole lot of that being highlighted anyway. It's just when you think about your time in the military, you do remember those small conversations that you have during these random moments. Now, in this scene, they're just taking a little bit of a break, which is an awesome time to really reflect on those sort of relationships and, again, the conversations and actions that you might see during these breaks.
Näis valittaa nälkääsi. Sulla lyödään eteesi semmonen rätik, jolla todistetaan, ettei varmasti voi olla nälkä.
So you can see they're chilling. This dude's just trying to do his own thing.
Sä tiedät, se on
And they're trying to do the right thing. You know, you always want to try and do the right thing, but
on tappaminenkin.
at this point, they're just over it. And I can definitely understand that from a military point of view. You get to the point where, like, yeah, you want to do the right thing, but, I mean, come on, this is just like a little pleasure you can actually get when you do get a break. So, I mean, the food looks dreadful. Absolutely looks dreadful. But it's just cool to see how they can actually, you know, throw that in there. Like, yeah, it's not them just doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. They want these little moments where they can have, like, these small victories to themselves. Then you have small scenes like this where, you know, you've just gone through some shit with your buddies and they understand what you've gone through. And now they're just willing to help you out. You know, just lighting up your cigarette. It's such a small thing, but it really does go to show, like, the relationship between the men themselves. And throughout the movie, you also have, like, this duo of characters, which, I mean, they're not really significant in and of themselves, but it's cool to have, like, this camaraderie in the movie itself, but you also have, like, these small cliques or even, like, these buddy relationships. And, you know, this movie highlights how these guys have been in combat before. And you can imagine once they've been through an experience like that together, they're going to be super tight. So they want to make sure that they stay in the unit together. So it goes and highlights that, you know, how those shared experiences really go to show to how it actually builds up their relationship. And even the people that haven't gone through it, they don't necessarily understand it. So in this scene, the officer doesn't necessarily understand, like, why you guys want to stick together so much. Like, who even are you guys? So it's cool how it also highlights, you know, how the backgrounds really come into play in the movie. And the scenes don't always have to be, like, totally serious, because you have this scene right here where they're just getting drunk together. Again, it's sort of like those small victories you get. And that's where you can get some bonding in, especially when the officers are included. And it just makes sense because if you go through the same thing together and you're all super stressed out, you're all going to want to try and unwind at some point. And whenever you do get the chance to get this alcohol or what have you, whatever it is to unwind, you're all going to take the opportunity together because you understand what each person has gone through. And I don't know, it's just a lot easier to relate to each other at that point. And it's really cool, especially the conversations you get during those moments when you're actually unwinding and whatnot. Or even if it's not conversation, if you just remember things like this, where, you know, you guys are just getting stupid together, you'll definitely remember that too. And this next scene is really awesome because it really goes to show that even though you're in this horrible environment and you have all these horrors around you and you've seen nothing but violence for the past, you know, however many months, you can find these small pieces of beauty, I guess. It sounds kind of corny to say, but when you can find, like, beauty in certain things, then it really, I don't know, it just helps you out mentally because it gets you out of that mindset of, you know, everything is just horrible. Everything around me is just super horrible. But if you can find beauty in something, then it's super nice. I know specifically when I was on deployment one time, we were going through a field and I was just super miserable. I was not in the right spirits. And then I just saw this red poppy that was just sticking out. So I don't know why. There was a bunch of poppies all around the field, but there was just one red poppy that was just particularly vibrant. And I don't know, it's just finding those small pieces of beauty really help to lift your spirits. And I don't know, it just gets you out of the funk, I guess. And that's what's happening in this scene. I mean, these guys who are bred for violence at this point, you know, they can find small creatures and still be kind to them. I mean, most people watching this probably wouldn't have expected him to, you know, pick up the rabbit and pet it. But whenever he actually does do it, you can sort of get in his mindset of, you know, why he was actually doing that. And I don't know, it's just really cool. I'm really glad that they added that scene to the movie. And as an enlisted man, there was something else that really stood out to me is the movie was pretty good about showing the division between the officers and the lower enlisted, because you have the officers, everyone has a certain idea of officers and what they should be doing, how duty should always come first for officers and everything. But this movie does a good job of showing the officers, going through everything with the enlisted and really getting a better mindset of what their priorities should actually be, and not just going straight with, whatever the higher ups are saying. You have this beginning scene where it shows the officers and sort of their priorities of what they're actually trying to do with everything. But it's funny how you can see the divide between the officers and the enlisted just in this beginning scene. How, the enlisted are just, they're going out trying to get cigarettes and tea.
Tullosen merkitö ilmassa. Tokko me tuoteta kaanetta silmien sua hakattava ennen milloinkaan.
Because they're just trying to enjoy what they can get at this point, because they know it's about to be super horrible.
Pitäkää paljon tupakkaa sua.
Paljonko haluatte?
Olkaa pakettia. Pannahan niitä rinkeleitä joku 10.
Liikutas toi piasi. Ei tullut siitä likasta jalasta äitti. Sitä täytyy olla napeakauluksessa kanssa.
So again, just getting some cigarettes and some tea. And then you can see the officer just doesn't have a care in the world. And that really goes to show the urgency of the situation and how it's felt differently from different ranks. The enlisted are going to feel a much higher sense of urgency because they know they're about to be in the shit, really. And the higher ups, the higher ups, they're not really as concerned because they know, as long as the enlisted are doing what they're supposed to be doing and what they tell them, I don't really need to be too concerned. And then you have this scene where, again, the officer is just doing his thing, and then he's almost like intruding on the enlisted because they're just trying to relax, and then, they need to do all this.
Kyllä ollaan, herra majuri.
Jaa. Onkos pojilla tupakkaa?
Kyllä on, herra majuri. Mahorkko sätkiä me kääritään, herra majuri.
Vai niin? Miltä se maistuu?
Kessut, herra majuri. Kessu maistuvat.
Niinpä tietysti.
Yeah, so it's funny. You have the officer who's trying to relate to the lower enlisted and whatnot, but in reality, the lower enlisted they don't care about that small talk and the formalities. They're just seeing it at face value. Like, it's a cigarette. It's going to taste like a cigarette wherever you have it. So it's kind of funny how they just add that little bit of enlisted sarcasm, and the officer is just trying to be relatable to the enlisted. Now, there's always going to be that divide, which we sort of saw previously with the low enlisted whenever they were able to have a rest, and they weren't supposed to be eating their rations at that point, and they just started doing it. There's always that division between, what the officers actually want them to do and what they should be doing, when in reality they're not really going to be doing it that way, especially when the enlisted are all together, and then you have like their platoon leader or what have you. You can imagine that stuff sort of goes to the wayside whenever the priorities start to shift. When you're on a patrol, your priorities are going to be completely different from when, you're in garrison and then the officers are walking. Now, this scene is really good about showing how, the enlisted just have to suffer a little bit more than the officers. Because you can see the enlisted, they're walking, they have all this weight. And then you have people who are privileged, to be in a car. They still have to render their salute and everything. So you can really see there's different levels of comfort, experience from the enlisted and the officers. And there's also just different levels, again, of the weight that each person has to actually carry themselves. So it definitely varies from enlisted to officer. And this scene does a pretty good job of just showing that really quick. Again, it's like a 15-second scene, but it has a lot of meaning behind it. And then in some scenes, the officers really take it too far to the point where they're almost trying to flex on the enlisted, saying, hey, if you don't listen to me, then there's going to be consequences. And I want you to see these consequences.
Palveluksessa heille antamaa käskyä. Tämän vuoksi pikaoikeus on tuominnut sotamies Korhosen ja sotamies Peltolan mainitusta rikoksesta kummankin kärsimään.
And you see this all the time in the military. Them trying to make an example out of someone who, did something inherently wrong to them. And this is just taking it to a whole nother level. Right, so like group punishment is a big thing in the military. If one person messes up, they like to mess everyone up just to get the point across that, if you mess up, then your buddies have to suffer with you. And this is this is kind of similar. Again, it's weird to compare. Again, this is taking it to a whole nother level, but it's the same sort of mindset where the officers are just trying to, it's like a power balance of them just trying to make sure that the enlisted actually listen to them. And you do see this a lot in the military. Sometimes it is warranted where they do need to make an example out of someone, but sometimes it can just feel a little bit off. It's like someone just did something completely out of the norm and they just did something totally wild on their own accord, but now everybody has to suffer. And it's just one of those, things that kind of sucks being in the military. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with, but sometimes it can get pretty brutal. Again, this is just a funny scene. You have this dude on post, something the officers wouldn't have to do. And then you have, the officers coming up.
Mitäs tämä on? Mikäs mies te olette?
Vartiomies. Vartiomieshän onkin sellainen mies, että sille ei pidä rähisti. Näillä tuossa saatkin suuret valtuudet.
Mitä te teette?
Eikä verran lampuu jalkaa itsenään. Joo, tää sen verran hahmolla.
So big difference in priorities here. He's not taking that as seriously as they would like.
Miksi me tässä sit ois? Näitä sielläkin ilman kyselemättä, että meidän vartio liskomme yhtenä katselee periskooppia. Vartiomies se sellainen.
Mikä teidän nimenne on?
And you see this a bunch, but what's really cool at the end of the movie is you start to see how the lieutenants and the lower officers really start to bond with the enlisted because they're going through everything with them and they understand the struggles that they're actually going through. But then you have the higher ups who are going and trying to just, enforce the specific standard, enforce, this is what I want. Why aren't you doing this? But then you can see the lower officers, like the lieutenants and whatnot, really standing up for their guys, and that's really cool to see because that's definitely how it would get, especially when you get to a point where, you're trying to appease the higher ups, but it gets to a point where they're just asking for too much, and you're just not willing to give that much, and that's what you can sort of see in this scene right here. Like he already knows what's happening.
Perkele! Missä oli miehen reservi? Täällä kökötetään tien varressa vailla varmistusta. Teidän hätäisen arviointenne takia me menetimme parhaan mahdollisen aseman.
Miehet olivat tappioiden lomauttaneet.
Minä tunnen kyllä tilanteen.
All the formalities are gone.
Te hoidatte pataljoonan, kunnes Lammio saa huollon järjestykseen. Luutantti Ovaska saa konekiväärit.
Käski upottaa konekiväärit lampeen saadakseni miehet kantamaan haavoittuneet. Vain yhden jätin.
And he's starting to see it, so you can see he feels almost betrayed that he's having an officer who has a different mindset or opinion than he does. And it's really funny to see how that really gets worse and worse throughout the movie. But it's funny to see how the lieutenants will still stick up for their guys and everything.
Tämä on tahallista kapinaa! Tämä on tahallista vihollisen auttamista! Minä käskin tuoda kaluston. Konekiväärimiehet ovat konekiväärimiehiä.
That dude is a really good actor.
Te olitte pataljoonan komentaja, ettekä mikään apusisar.
And again, they're all just like in disbelief that he doesn't see it from their point of view yet, which is crazy, especially with how long this war has actually been going on. Like it blows their mind that this dude just literally is so disconnected from what they've been going through that he's still demanding certain things from them that they just can't give, and they don't care about giving because it's not their priority at this point. And this is what I sort of mean, where it's more of a drama than it is like an actual war movie, because you can see all these themes and these struggles that all the characters are going through. And again, it's just this conflict between the characters while they're all just trying to, again, survive this conflict. You can see they're really motivated to do what the officers and everyone are telling them to do, but towards the end of the movie, they really start shifting. Again, they start shifting their priorities to just self-preservation because they start to see that it's not necessarily going to go the way that the officers are envisioning. And it starts to highlight other things like it's not always so serious about these underlying themes, but it goes to show how experience is really valuable in this movie because you can have these inexperienced officers who are telling the lower enlisted to do specific things, but then you have these experienced guys who are going out and doing their own thing, which the officers don't like, but the officers start to see how effective it actually is. And that's really cool to see how they actually show that experience versus their rank. So you have this inexperienced officer who's just listening to this guy who's been there and done that. So at this point, he's just following his lead. But I mean, he's not arguing at this. You can see he knows that he doesn't have the level of experience he needs. So again, you will see this a lot in the military where you have these fresh officers, and I mean they have a general understanding that they're not going to know exactly how to do certain things, but they are taught how to do certain things, and they believe that they're taught how to do certain things more than the enlisted do just because they're officers and they're held to a certain standard. But at the same time, whenever you actually get to the unit or deployment or what have you, if you're not used to that situation and you have people who are used to it, you're going to start to see that the officers will start to fall under them or ask advice from them. As long as they're humble enough, you will have certain officers in the military that just refuse to believe what they're actually saying, believe the experienced guys, and just start to do their own thing. And then when it blows up in their face, then yeah, the enlisted start to see that as well. So it's cool when you actually do have officers like this that are willing to listen to the enlisted who just know what they're actually doing. Now, although you start to see how the directors aren't really on the side of the officers, they're more focused on the enlisted themselves, the movie does a pretty good job of showing some of the sacrifices that the leaders do actually have to make for their guys, which is really cool. And this isn't really an officer sort of thing. It's sort of just a leader kind of thing. But it's showing how the leaders do have to sacrifice, either their safety or their comfort or, whatever it is for their guys. And that's cool how it actually involves that as well, because you can see the camaraderie between the lower enlisted or the enlisted themselves, which again makes a lot of sense. But there are those leaders out there who are willing to sacrifice to make things happen, and it's cool that it also highlights that, because there are leaders out there that are willing to make things happen even if they are sacrificing a lot, whether it be comfort or safety. This scene is pretty good at showing it, because they're at a standstill and he's just going out to try and make stuff happen. It just adds a certain level of respect and confidence. And then, of course, it doesn't end up too well for him. I'll skip that scene, but again, it adds a certain level of confidence in these people. You can see it does have an effect. So he gets taken out. And just that sacrifice right there meant a lot to them. You can see it really instilled a certain level of confidence and even a certain level of patriotism, I guess, because you have people who are willing to, again, put their safety aside to make sure that things happen. And then it sort of extends this feeling that it's not just about your own personal safety. You're doing this for your country and for the people back home. So it's something you need to remember, even if you are super stressed out, which we can see that Lieutenant was pretty stressed out. So again, it's cool how they actually balance that in. And this is something too, it goes to show how the officers are also willing to put themselves in a lot of danger when it comes to the really heroic stuff. So of course, in conflicts like this, of course you're going to hear of some extraordinary officers going out and taking things into their own hand. It gets to the point where they're not just sacrificing their safety, they want to make sure that no one else has to do this extremely dangerous task, especially when you're put in a really tough position where it's going to result in someone getting possibly hurt or killed, and you're just not willing to accept that because it's probably going to take a lot of people. Sometimes officers or leaders are willing to put themselves in that situation, and you won't see this as much just because it's sort of like a military thing. You're always told to delegate certain tasks, especially how officers and leaders might have a feeling that they're more valuable than they're enlisted. But again, sometimes it just gets to the points where you just need to take it into your own hand because you don't want to see anyone else have to do this task or whatever it is. Now, definitely without a doubt, my favorite theme in this movie is just the fact that these guys can't get a break, or they can't enjoy anything, just because in the back of their mind they're thinking about the conflict or what's to come next. They can't enjoy the time that they actually have. Even when they do get a chance to rest or be with someone they actually care about, they can't enjoy it just because, again, in the back of their mind, they have this thing looming. It's something that you have to go back to. And that's a big thing that, you feel, and I felt personally and still feel personally in the military. You go on leave, you get like maybe a week, maybe even up to a month of leave. But at the same time, it just feels so temporary because you're going home, you're visiting your family because you haven't seen them in like however many years. But at the same time, it's only a month, and the days are just going to continue dwindling down, and then you're just going to have to go back and leave them. So it's nice to have these certain moments of respite and have a break. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, it's just temporary, and you're going to have to say goodbye at some points in the near future. So it's crappy, and this movie does a really, really incredible job at conveying that emotion of what they're actually feeling and how they get disconnected from what they're doing with their families and what they're doing when they actually get a chance to rest. Now, this is one of the first few scenes you actually see in the movie, but it's the lieutenant who's about to go off to war, and he's trying to enjoy his time with his fiancée, I think, at this point in the movie. He's trying to enjoy his time with her, and you can see he doesn't really, he can't enjoy it because he knows he's going to a conflict where he might not even survive. This could be the last time he's actually seeing her. And whenever that's looming in the back of your mind, it's such a crappy feeling. You can see he's just automatically trying to disengage and disconnect himself from this person, which is not something he wants to do, but it's something that he feels he has to do just because if he doesn't, then it's going to crush him whenever he actually has to go and leave and everything.
Odotan.
So again, you can see he's just completely disconnected at this point. It doesn't help, especially when you're seeing stuff like that, where that's about to be him in like a few days. So he's trying to enjoy this time, but his vision and his eyes are just completely glazed over because his mind is somewhere else. And it's not all romantic stuff as well. You have people who try and enjoy these small moments, like when they're taking a break or whatever it is. They're trying to enjoy these small moments. They don't really have anything to go back to back home, but they can't enjoy it because it always gets interrupted by something, whether it be a new order or a new mission or even just the enemy coming up on you. In this scene right here, we can see they're trying to enjoy their food, and then it just gets interrupted. So you're always constantly paranoid. And you want to just, it's totally fine, it's nothing. But at the same time, it's either life or death for these guys. So it's not always romantic. You have these moments where these guys are trying to take a break and they just can't get one. Now, I think the character Roca, his story is probably the most meaningful and the most emotional, at least for me personally, with this movie, is because you can see he has his family, and he's already fought in the war, so he's done everything he needs to do. He's done his dirty work, and they call him back to service. So they had this feeling that that was all over with, and they can be comfortable and know what to expect, but then this happens. And you can see she knows exactly what's happening here. And you start to see this a lot throughout the movie, their sort of relationship where he really starts to sort of turn it off and just disconnect himself. And it gets more and more disconnected throughout the movie. See, right now it's sad because he needs to say goodbye, and he knows exactly what he's going to, and she generally has a good understanding too, but for him it's just duty, for her it's just it's almost like inconvenience. I mean, of course it's more than that, but it's just this inconvenience, and it's just unfair that yeah, he's been through all that already, but now he needs to go and do it again. And it's sort of just forcing their family to get torn apart. And it's just a crappy thing you have to see throughout this movie. But again, his story throughout this movie is definitely the one that I can relate to the most. Just having the feeling of you getting taken away from your family just to go. Like for me right now, I'm here in Korea. I have to be here for a year, and I couldn't take my family with me. So you have these moments where, you know, you get comfortable with certain things, and then you have to deploy or you know, go overseas or do something, go to a training where you just get taken away from your family and you miss all this stuff. And yeah, it sucks for them, especially, you know, their country's getting invaded, so he didn't really have a choice. And I'm sure he can appreciate and understand the purpose, but it's just one of those things that you have to deal with. It's like inconvenience to a whole nother level. Now you can see he gets some leave. So he gets to be with his family again, and
Ne tuli viikoksi.
Johan tässä on odotettukin. Hyvikö siellä haista pahat kou?
so he tries to be happy for them, but
Hyvä, kun siellä tuli. Hevonen pitää kengittää ja puukuorma hakkee.
you can see for him it's just very temporary,
Me mennään sisään.
and he's already just super disconnected. So I think right now he's just trying to help out wherever he can, because he knows, I mean, at least he can help out. If not do anything with his kids or really cherish any other memories, he can at least help out around the house. Now this scene is probably the saddest for me, just because he's starting to think about home again. So you try and be disconnected, but sometimes it just brings you back. And it's really sad when it starts to get to the kids and they can start seeing what's happening with the family and everything. And this happens a lot, especially like when you're in the military, you have these times where you just start thinking about family a little bit more than you normally would. And that's usually around, you know, holidays, special events, whether it be birthdays or what have you. Because missing a kid's birthday or missing like Christmas with your family is just one of those feelings that, you know, you can't look past, because you have these things that's supposed to be really joyous and you're supposed to be celebrating and everything, but you can't, just because the family's not together, and it just almost feels hollow and not necessarily meaningless, but it doesn't feel the same as what it used to. And you know exactly what Christmas, you know, feels like with the family and what Christmas should feel like, or birthdays or what have you. But you can't have that feeling anymore, because you're in this situation where you can't even think about that because it's not an option. And even though you know it's not really an option, you do start to think about it, just because you want this certain feeling, or you want to remember this, you want to have these memories with your family or what have you, and you just can't, because again, it's just completely cut off. There's absolutely no way it's going to happen, and you just start to feel how unfair it is for you to be in a situation like that. And you know, it's not necessarily a military sort of thing. You do see it a lot more in the military, but everyone sort of goes through this certain thing where it just feels unfair that they have to be in a situation where they can't enjoy certain things like everyone else. And again, he goes on leave. Now he's got a new baby, which is super hard, especially when you have to leave that new baby, because
Isä, älä enää mene sinne.
again, he's not even trying as hard anymore.
Syö soppas.
And that's when it really starts to stress out the family and everything. But yeah, this scene's pretty sad. Again, this is where you get those like unproductive thoughts where, you know, I could just stay and leave everyone else, but you know you have a duty, and it's just one of those things. It just feels unfair that you have to go and do something else. And again, you do try and have these moments where you try and bring it together, but it definitely doesn't get any easier. But I can appreciate this especially because, I mean, I have 2 kids and I wasn't there for either of their births, because the first time I was deployed, the second time I was out of school because I had to go to that school to get promoted, and it's super hard to get to school otherwise. So I wasn't there for either of my kids' birth, which is just one of those things, like it's one of those things that only happens once. You just feel like you get robbed of a certain opportunity, but you do get over it because, again, you know there's other things going on, like your career, being in the military, having to serve with other guys who need you in a certain situation. So again, it's just, at the end of the day, it just feels like unfair that you get to miss these opportunities that other people are afforded. But again, you do have a purpose and you have to go out and do that purpose. But what this movie does a really good job with is showing how the soldiers are struggling through these certain situations, and just showing that almost emptiness that they actually have in their expressions. Even though if they're trying to be happy and they know that, you know, they're totally faking it and they know that for a fact, but they're trying to make it convincing. Like in this scene, you can see, again, he just told his wife at this point, he just told her that he's going back to his platoon, and he's trying to be happy for her and everything, and make sure that she's comfortable with it. Which you sort of see, again, the fake smile. And then he turns away and he's completely disconnected. And again, it is weighing on him that he's being robbed of certain opportunities, but again, he has other things to do and he has other people that need him. So it's just a crappy situation to be in. And you do get used to the idea of having to, you know, sort of fake your emotions sometimes, but you get to the point where it's just taxing and you don't want to do it, and sometimes you just don't try as hard. You can see he had like a small smile, but yeah, it wasn't really working out too well. You can see she was still taking it pretty rough. So I've been talking for a long time, but I just want to hit up one more theme in this movie, and that is just the fact that you can see everyone maturing together, because, you know, you can see this with people in the military in general. Even if you have people who join the military when they're older, when they're like 30 or what have you, you have people who join the military, but they still go through experiences that they haven't gone through before. So they do mature from those experiences. Now, normally you would just see young people joining the military, and they're just maturing because they're just becoming an adult and they're learning how life actually works. But it's crazy how in the military you'll see people mature so much faster than they would anywhere else. That's why you see people who are trying to get married super young. In the military, at least in the U.S. military, you have people who get married at like 18, 19, 20 years old, and they start having a family when they're like 20 or 21. I mean, I had a kid when I was 21. So you have people who are maturing much faster and trying to just get a head start on life, just because they know that whenever they're in the military, they're going to miss certain opportunities. So they want to have these sort of comforts to help them out and help them understand what being an adult is actually like. And for some, getting married just is one of those things. When you have someone to sort of vent to or what have you, it's one of those things to sort of cope and help you out. But this movie does a really good job of showing how they mature throughout their entire experience. Sometimes you can see it from scene to scene, but throughout the whole movie, you can see a dramatic change. And it's kind of sad, honestly, when you really look at it, because you have these people who are just forced to mature because they're put in these situations that are just, you know, so dreadful that they come to reality so quickly, and it just sort of rips them of their innocence, so to speak. So this character specifically, So you have these characters that are all cheerful and they're optimistic, even though they're already in a crappy situation because they know what they're going into. They have this optimism just because they want it to work out better than, it might, especially in a war like this where your survivability isn't too high. They have this optimism and this innocence that, things might just end up a little bit better than I'm actually picturing. So I'm just going to cling to that hope. But you can see it gets ripped away really quickly. Now this scene, you can see immediately his buddy got injured and it's just not something that he expected to see or something he wanted to see. This is where it really starts affecting him because now it gets, really personal and directly related to him. And you can see he just takes it a certain way. His demeanor changes completely because he's taking it more serious. And really the icing on the cake for this character is towards the end of the movie where they're rushing some trenches and they're doing a really good job. They're still alive, they're with their buddies and everything's going really well. And then, one of their buddies gets taken out in like a second and you can see his demeanor just changes like immediately because again he's having these moments of optimism and hope that he might be surviving the war and things are going to be okay, but then something just happens and just crushes all of that.
Iskuryhmä vanhala. Loistava suoritus. Synnyin maa ei unohda teitä.
Mun loppu lippaat. Hei, kuudet.
And again, it's just one of those things that you shouldn't have to see and you don't expect to see happen. And it just changes your demeanor immediately because again, it takes that optimism and that hope and it just rips it away and replaces it with, seriousness because it's all about survivability at that point. And it just snaps you back to reality that you're in a position or you're in a location or situation where that could happen to you at any point. Now, in movies like Saving Private Ryan, there's not really like any character development to the point where you see these people start off a certain way and they get really optimistic and then it gets shattered. You don't really see that so much. In Band of Brothers, you see it a little bit more, but I'd say with this movie, you can jump in at any point and immediately get sucked into the movie because you can see what sort of emotions they're going through. There's not a whole lot of war movies out there where you can just jump into any part of the movie and immediately get sucked in and invested in what's going on. And that's sort of due in part because this movie has layers. It's not just focusing on this badass military unit who just going out there and kicking ass. You have this emotion because you're starting to involve the families, you're starting to involve this survivability, and you get this urgency throughout the movie that, anything could change at this point. Sometimes there's a scene where everyone's all cheery and the next scene is just completely bleak and it's just looking miserable for them. So it's nice how it just continues to bring you back to reality, but also gets you to see how tight-knit the unit is actually getting just because they get these little breaks and they get these moments to enjoy themselves. But yeah, it really goes to show how fast these guys are actually maturing throughout the movie. And that's a really awesome theme to see itself. But definitely for me, the fact that the families have to get involved in this conflict, and you can see the disconnect between the soldiers whenever they're talking to their family or visiting their family. You can really see that disconnect, and even when they're back into the fight, they have these moments where they're thinking about family, and it just gets a little bit harder for them to focus on what they're doing and what they have to do. But yeah, I don't know how long this video actually was. I have no idea. I've not been keeping track because, again, it's an awesome movie to watch. It's an awesome movie to think about, and it's an awesome movie to talk about. I really wish more people from the U.S. knew about this movie. I mean, obviously, I had no idea this movie existed. It is a Finnish movie, but you can get it with subtitles, which is what I got. And again, even with subtitles, it's not diminished at all. Of course, the actors are fantastic. You can see with their facial expressions what they're actually going through. You don't need to have all this specific dialogue. Again, they do have dialogue that's tailored to convey certain emotions, but it's nice because you don't necessarily need the dialogue or need it word for word to understand exactly what's going on. So really kudos to the actors and just the directors for putting this entire movie together, because it really does do something that a lot of war movies don't do. It conveys a lot more that a lot of movies miss out on because they're so focused on, showing all this action or showing all this thing. They're tailoring it to an audience that doesn't really understand what these guys are actually going through. And it's sort of a shame that you have movies that do that, but it's nice when you have movies like this that really knock it out of the park and convey all the emotion that's included with the scenes that you actually see in the movie. But definitely let me know what you guys think about this movie. If you haven't seen it, especially if you're from Finland, you definitely need to see this movie. But if you're an American, if you're from the United Kingdom, you need to check out this movie as well, because it's a fantastic war movie. Even if you don't know a whole lot about the continuation war, this movie helps to understand that a lot, helps to understand the struggle that they're actually going through, because again, they're trying to retake their territory, and they do that a little bit, and then they have these setbacks to where it doesn't work out for them. So it has a little bit of history involved and understanding of the conflict itself, but you can really understand the emotion, especially the emotion with that Finnish people would actually have when you're talking about the continuation war, when you're talking about Finland in general. They say the sisu mentality, but you can't really understand it until you really start watching a movie that can actually convey that emotion correctly. And this movie does a fantastic job at that. So again, amazing movie. I highly recommend you guys check it out. Thank you guys for recommending it to me and forcing me to watch it, because again, it's one of those, it's definitely, if not my favorite movie, it's in the top 3 easily. Incredible movie, and I'm glad they put this much money into producing it. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's just cool to check out these scenes and sort of elaborate on my point of view and how I'm actually feeling about it. Because if you haven't been in the military, or even if your military experience is different, if you have a family or you don't have a family, you can get different emotions from different scenes. And it's cool for me to just talk about everything that I saw and how it actually related to me. But yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments section. And yeah, if you liked it, feel free to hit that thumbs up. And definitely feel free to let me know what you think about the movie in general and how it might relate to you or your family or your military experience, because I'd love to hear from your point of view as well. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. That is it for this one. I will see you all in the next one.